Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 436 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week. Kicking things off with the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. Richard, you're back home. I see the teddy bear and the playmats. How are things back in the US?
Good morning, Seth. Things are great. My internet works. It's fast.
It's not 2 a.m. when we're recording.
That's all I need. I just need internet.
Oh, well, it's good to have you back and not recording in the middle of the night for the podcast. We also have another co-host who, I guess it's technically the middle of the night for you, sort of, but on your own Crim time schedule. Good morning, Crim. How are you today?
Extremely sore.
I saw your Twitter. You were at a show last night, right? Stage diving or something?
Yeah, I stage dove a lot. I went and saw a band called No Pression. Let me tell you something. I don't know why. Like, I was in the zone yesterday, and then today I am extremely sore. I don't know what happened, but
like being an old man, Crim.
Yeah.
I stage dove a lot and like screamed my heart out, and now I'm sore in places I didn't know I could be.
Oh, well, anyway, our plan for today, we got a couple of big topics. We want to talk a bit about new standard, or quote-unquote new standard, post-ban standard, kind of our first impressions of what standard's like now that we got 3 cards banned in the format. And then we're in the middle of Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth spoiler season. So we want to go through some spoiler cards specifically focused on cards that we think might maybe sort of have a chance in 60 card formats like Legacy and Modern. And we'll cover the Commander stuff on the Commander Clash podcast in the future, and then maybe answer some fish mail. So that's the overview for today. Before we get into it, though, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. And if you ever get tired of all the hassles that go into buy listing your cards, Card Conduit lets you skip them. You can use their curated service to send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more, and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a bit of work, you can use the sorted service, where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. And no matter which one you choose, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once the order is processed. And you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic, and let's start with new standard. So we are 1 week post bannings. So I think we've all played some standard in the time. We got a little bit of standard results. There haven't been any big standard tournaments, but we got some standard challenges from Magic Online where we can kind of see what the meta is looking like. So question number 1. Is standard saved? What are your guys' impressions of this new standard meta? So did the bannings change anything? Fix anything?
Okay. This is gonna seem bad, but the way I like Void Rend, I'm gonna just start right there.
Oh god, new standard, same as the old. Yep.
Yo, but like legit though, control is really good. Jace has been the everybody laughed, and then at me in spoiler season they were just like, "Yo, Jace is terrible," yada yada yada. Jace is the win con, and Jace has been popping up. Blue-white has been showing up. Jace has just been milling the hell out of people. I literally did nothing. I played a game against the Naya ramp deck. I did nothing but play 2 Jaces and won. I did nothing but just play 2 Jaces, -5, they lost.
So I mean, Crim's not completely insane here. Like, actually, Azorius Control did win one of the challenges this weekend. So I think Control is back. Although, I don't know if everyone's caught up to your sweet Jace tech, though. If I'm just looking at the deck list, it seems like Wandering Emperors to Fairy to Power Pilgrim, it seems like those are kind of like the go-to planeswalkers, at least for the decks that have been like showing up at the top of tournaments. I have lost to Jace though. Like I don't see Jace very often, but when it does show up, like I ran into someone and I thought of you, Crim. They were playing Broker's Ascendancy Jace, and it got up to like 9 loyalty, and they milled me for like 30 and then reanimated and milled me, and I was just like dead. So yeah, there are some Jace synergies. What about you, Richard? What is your impression of this format?
I've seen nothing but Mono Blue Temple and Azorius. And get me out of the standard, man.
Whoa. What do you mean? What do you mean?
I don't like Mono Blue Temple, man.
Okay,
Where are you playing, Moto?
Moto.
Okay.
Moto, where your Azorius control decks reign supreme, but I haven't seen a mid-range deck, but I've seen nothing but aggro, and I'm playing mono white still. Well, I'm playing Boros. I just basically took out my bank busters and threw in more Eigenjos or whatever and called it a day. But I'm still playing the same thing. My Italies are a lot worse now that I'm getting like garbage soldiers off the top. So I don't know if I'm happy with Italy anymore without the the prospect of like flipping Invoke Despairs and stuff like that. So maybe I go back to just mono white. I'm not sure. It's
okay. Oh, don't do that. Do not do that. Mono white is okay. Do it, but like just be ready to lose a lot because that deck mono white gets dumpstered by control.
Yeah, by control. I can't even beat the counter spells coming out of mono blue tempo, let alone a control deck.
Yeah, but mono blue tempo is a thing again, right? Seth's favorite. But good news.
Void
Have
Rend.
you heard of our Lord and Savior? Void Rend. Legit though.
Wait. I got a legit question. Is anyone still playing Rakdos? Have you seen a Rakdos player try to cobble together a deck after having half the cards removed?
I have.
I've definitely seen somebody that's like, you could tell they're like, I invested the wild cards, right? And like, you could tell because there's just like random things in there. I'm like, okay, this isn't that good at all. But here's Chandra, and then like so.
And then you still lost because of the Chandra?
No. It's just because now when you're playing control, there's not a one thing that you like. There's not like 50 different things that you have to counter, right? There's only like 1 to 2 things. So control's back on the menu. It's back on the menu. We're cooking. Control mages, we're cooking right now. It is so damn good.
I mean, it's definitely shifted the meta, right? I've seen some Rakdos. I've seen some people trying Rakdos Sacrifice as the way to go Rakdos, like try to go back to that plan, and you got Obnixilis and the Sacrifice stuff. I've seen some people playing like what Krim said, just like, oh, I threw Liliana in where Fable the Mirror Breaker used to be, and I'm trying to make it work. The Rakdos hasn't looked good, but I feel like the meta has really, like, Rakdos being gone has really kind of crushed mid-range in general. So now we went from like mid-range slogs to aggro versus control, really. Like that's what I see the most of. Either like dedicated aggro decks like Soldiers and Mono Red, Esper, which I guess maybe you can call that mid-range, but it's pretty
Legends.
Aggressive. Like the Esper Legends deck versus like dedicated control, like Azorius control. You got some people trying Jeskai control style decks. I like the shift. I've actually really
Wow, Seth, you left a control variant out.
What? Well,
you didn't say Esper.
Oh, did I?
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I haven't played against you, Grim. Once we run into each other on the arena ladder, then I'll believe the Esper control is a thing again. But I've enjoyed the format. Like, it feels pretty fresh. I think the bannings have certainly had like a huge impact. I feel like enchantments kind of got unbanned. I've been like really trying out like Spirit Sisters, All Will Be One, Tribute to the World Tree, like the Ascendancy Cycle. These enchantments that gotta like sit out on the battlefield are so much better. I actually think Mono Green might be good again. Like Nissa got a lot better. Like, with Invoke around, you'd like play Nissa and make the big token, and then they just like invoke and kill the token in Nissa and you'd scoop. But now that Invoke's gone, you can actually like reevaluate Planeswalkers, reevaluate enchantments. I've really been enjoying it. Like, we'll see what happens. The data so far, I would say, is encouraging. If you look at the standard challenges, Esper's like the number 1 deck, but it's something like 12% of the meta. In one of them, it was 18% of the meta. And then surprisingly, Mono Red is number 2, coming in at like 15% of the meta, 12% of the meta. That's a huge change from like 40+% of the meta being Rakdos. So I've been enjoying it. Do you think that this is going to be a good format moving forward? Or do you have any concern that we're going to end up with a Rakdos situation with another archetype? Or do you think now that Fable and Invoke are gone, Bankbuster's gone, are we going to have a relatively like diverse and healthy Rock, Paper, Scissors meta?
Yes. Because now, like, if control takes off too hard, then Mono Blue or something like that will check it, right? And like Mono Blue is still very good against that.
Thrun. It's Thrun's time to shine, Krim. It's coming. It's coming for you.
I can tell you what, Thrun is more likely to happen than when I remember everyone was like, Krim, this is Carnage Tyrant. I'm like, no, whatever Tyrannosaurus Hex or something like
Yeah.
that card is terrible. I've seen some people play that. I'm just like, yo, check this out. I'm gonna kill it.
You can't Void Rend a Thrun though, right? That actually does dodge the Void Rend.
Okay, I got a question for you, Stan,
Okay, yes.
For Seth while Krim regains his connection. Is Standard fun?
Is
It
Standard
has shifted. Is it fun?
I'm
Are
back.
you going to play? You don't play any of these games, but are you going to play Diablo 4? Are you
Yo.
going to play Street Fighter 6? Are you going to go outside and see the sun because it's summertime? Or are you going to be sweaty, sit inside and grind some post-ban Standard?
Post-ban Standard, dude. It's fun.
I think it's fun.
It's fun.
I think it's fun right now. It to me, the bannings shook up the format enough that it's got a little bit of that like new set or rotation feel where there's like a lot of things that I wasn't seeing much before and people trying different things. Ask me in another week or two and we'll see. Like that feeling usually wears off in Standard pretty quickly. And then we're back to what we were talking about before with like long time until there's a new set, no rotation this year. So I still have all those concerns. But for the short term, like this week, next week, like I actually am playing Standard over Diablo, or I guess Civilization or whatever. Like a game I might actually play, which isn't Diablo, but I've been thinking it's fun. Do you not think it's fun, Richard? Oh, so here's my question for you. You love mid-range grinds. Do you find this format less fun than the Rakdos format pre-bannings, just because it's shifted so much away from mid-range?
I don't find it less fun, but I find it just the same. Like, yes, the decks are kind of different, but it's like I'm playing around the same Make Disappears, right? I'm playing around the same Wandering Emperor. I'm playing around the Eigenjo land thing, right? Like, it's the same stuff I'm doing all the time. So, yes, your shells are different. And it was the same problem with the mid-range fest, right? Like, yes, you're playing against Rakdos or Grixis or Mardu or something, but it's like the same cards, right? So, yes, although Standard has changed, I don't know how much longer. Like, I'm trying really hard to play Standard. You know? I'm like, okay, I'm going to play
Wait,
League.
hold on.
And then I'm like watching Diablo 4 videos on the side. I'm like, I must not play Diablo 4. I can't play Diablo 4. I'll just watch videos, right? And then I'm like
messaged
playing my
Richard
League.
about it.
But I don't know. It's how many Wandering Emperors can you cast? That is what you must ask yourself, right?
I mean,
A lot.
isn't this like a problem with the new rotation schedule though? Like just like those cards are going to be around so long, and
that's why I don't like it.
even if the format's healthy, it's going to feel samey, where it's just you're playing around the same cards, playing with the same cards. So I think that concern is I still have that concern.
We're way too early into. We're not even in it yet, right? Like we're not even in the new rotation yet, right? So like, I think that this is going to change entirely as we actually add another year's worth of sets. We just can't, like you've seen
who's
these
going to
cards.
upseat the Wandering Emperor, and if they do, they'll be even more broken.
I mean, maybe, but like think about like the depth of the card pool, right? Like we're not there now, right? And the shakeup has changed. Yeah, you've seen these cards before, but you know, it's what we've seen for the last 2 years. It's just nice to know that like now when I play these cards, they're not going to auto get answered by Invoke Despair. They're not going to immediately like my opponents actually have to figure out if they're going to keep a real hand or just keep 3 lands Fable and win, right? Like there's actually decision making, right? Like when it comes to like the games right now. And I think I miss that part of Magic where things don't just like snowball absurdly like they do or they did pre-ban, right? So now post-ban decisions matter. Like you actually have to pay attention to what you're doing.
I mean,
I got a question for you, Krim. I got a question. So you're a big fan of like super strong answers, right? And
I mean,
the last 2 bannings that people have been praising that basically unlocked all these decks were Meatball Massacre, Invoke Despair, which are basically like really strong removal where, you know, we can't even play our like 6-drop Planeswalker or 6-drop enchantments or basically any boarded creatures. They all get answered like too cleanly and it oppresses decks. So is the answer removal is too strong now and we gotta tone it down? We gotta go all casual. Like you gotta go back to like bad removal, like very strong threats, or how does that? I don't know. How does that work with the snowballing threats, right? Like on one hand we have threats that snowball out of control. On the other hand, we have removal that oppresses like half the metagame. Like what is the answer here?
I love some strong answers, but I also think some things were a bit too much, right? And I will say, okay, like Invoke, I didn't think it, right? I didn't think about it until I actually played in an Invoke free standard, but because I didn't think Invoke needed to be banned. But having played in the standard where it's banned, I definitely see why it was too good, right? It was way too good. I mean, I knew it was very good, not like it was a bad card, but like, wow. So I think the thing here is this standard, like they need to take, like the answers, they can chill. They can chill a little bit, right? They can tune it down in power a little bit. I think Meatball Massacre.
Next VNR.
Yo, Void Ren though, like that is the perfect level of balance, right? Like I think that despite, you know what's really sad? Despite two of the best answers being banned, Standard and Control has some of the best answers it's ever had. Still, in between Farewell, Sunfall, Temporal Lockdown, right? All these things, Sheoldred's Edict, you still have all these really good answers. I think right now where we're at is at the perfect level of powerful answers, powerful creatures, right? Like, that's why Thalia is one of the most important things in the standard for aggro. And I think that, like, Thalia is huge for that. Like,
I do wish they'd chill with the Exile Wrath a tiny bit. It's like, it's so funny that they print these like indestructible, like the Dominus cycle, and then they print all the indestructible Wraths, so you just can't play like the splashiest mythics from the set. Like it just kind of keeps them out of the format. So I kind of hope they don't go too far down the like exile based Wrath mode. As far as Invoke though, like, isn't the problem with Invoke and Meatball Massacre is they're really strong answers that are never dead? Like that's kind of the problem with Invoke, yes. Right? Like it's a great removal spell, but usually the problem with the removal is if your opponent doesn't have something to answer, it gets stuck in your hand and it's not good. Invoke like is just as good if your opponent's on an empty board. You're hitting for 6, drawing 3. Meatball not quite like that, but I definitely had times where you would just run out Meatball for 2 mana just to start gaining life and draining, like even if there wasn't something to wrath away. So I feel like maybe like it's okay for cards to be situational. I hope Wizards like realizes that. I feel like they've gone so far towards not letting cards be dead, maybe partly because of best of one and they don't want people to like have dead cards in their best of one deck because there's no sideboarding them out or whatever. But I feel like it's okay for cards to sometimes like on a board state this card doesn't do something, and I feel like that's something we've moved away from a little bit.
I don't think the concern is that, you know, it's best of one. I just think that Magic as a whole has, it's just power creep, right? They power creep within itself. They know all their cards. Like, example, all the threats, Fable, they do everything on their own, right? They snowball on their own. So because that, the answers kind of have to be so overtuned that it's like
the answers
hilarious.
Need to be win cons too.
Right.
If your opponent has no creatures, you win the game.
Yeah. but also think about this. It's funny that these answers were so good, but at the same time, Fable was that much better because like once you even if you answered it, you still lost.
Yeah.
So like this is the thing, and so now I think the game as a whole can like benefit from powering down a little bit, like to the level where like the standard, like the power is at for removal right now, and then like where the threats are. I think it's really good.
Well, I think can't power really down because then no card will ever see play again. That, you know, any new card they print, if it's lower power, it won't see any play until rotation happening. Who knows when in the future?
It doesn't. I mean, lower as in lower than Fable, lower than Invoke. Right? Oh. The answers. Please do not take me back to like Ixalan. I never want to go back to that.
Oko.
Right?
We're gonna reprint Oko in the standard.
Yo, I'm not even joking. Okay, I think in 2 Horizon sets, Oko can be unbanned. I bet you Oko will be unbanned, and it will actually seem not that bad of a card in Modern. I'm just saying.
That's no way. I don't buy it.
You don't believe that. Okay, so you don't think in a 2 Horizon sets, Oko won't be that bad?
I'm scared of that might actually be the case 2 Horizons from now.
give 2 Horizons, and I don't mean
just imagine a world 2 Horizons ago and you wouldn't believe where we're at, right? Yeah, like imagine Modern before Horizon. We're playing Tarmogoyf still, Seth.
Yeah.
You believe that? We're like Bloodbraid Elf is so
Yes,
OP. Should we keep it banned?
we all
like, that
were
was
doing
two
that,
Horizons
Richard.
ago.
Yeah, no, that's... I mean, really, though, Modern... Wrapping around to something Krim said, Modern is what makes me skeptical that adding an extra year to Standard actually matters. Like, Modern has 20 years of set, and the best cards are the best cards, and everyone still plays the best cards. So I don't know if I buy this argument that adding an extra year is going to lead to increased diversity, because Modern has many extra years, and instead of adding more diversity, it just makes it harder for cards from new sets to actually see play, because you got to compete against more cards. So you got to beat out Ragavan now, and like... it's really hard for a card to do that. So I'm a little skeptical that this like add an extra year thing matters, because then either like you have to power creep even more, or else you don't beat out Wandering Emperor and then like your cards don't see play. So I mean, I guess we'll see. Maybe Wizards has some design knobs they can turn that we haven't seen yet and some plan for this, but I'm a little skeptical that we're actually going to see it work out the way that ideally it would.
Is Wandering Emperor as good as you think it is? I mean, it's still very good. It's still very good. Please don't take this the wrong way. It's not a bad card, right? But in the Standard, Topiary, Stomper, all these things, they all have Vigilant now. People have been playing around it, right? Like, people just know that if they're against a control deck, I'm not going to attack with Sheoldred. I'm just going to flat out not attack with Sheoldred. I'm going to let you drain yourself out.
But it's
right?
still like
but people still play Wandering Emperor.
You still see it all the
though
time.
everyone's
Man.
playing
Right,
around
it's still-
it, right?
it's still
because you
good,
flash
but-
it in, make a knight, and go on your way, right?
Well, sure. But if
It's
I
the,
pay
it's the
4 mana
problem
to make a
you
knight,
were complaining about, right? It's an answer that also wins the game, right? It's
But this
removal
one-
that is
this
also
one's
a win con, right?
I think this one is fine. This one, oddly enough, why does it feel that Wandering Emperor is of the perfect power level, whereas like the invokes and all that stuff, the meatballs, those were too strong, right? And I think it's because like Wandering Emperor is just a very powerful planeswalker. That's what it is.
So it's not so
But
much
it's not
that
the
like
end of the world.
It's not so much that Wandering Emperor needs to like be banned or like it's overpowered in that sense. It's more that like it's hard for me to imagine it not being good for its entire life in Standard. So adding an extra year to Standard is just like an extra year that you got to play around Wandering Emperor, rather than that third year being something where you're playing around some new card that's maybe at least different. Like even if it's, you know, whatever, not better, but at least it would be a different card. There'd be more change. So I think that's like more my concern, is just like, or even Make Disappear. Make Disappear is not overpowered, but playing around it for 3 years is a lot longer than playing around it for 2 years. If the idea of your format is it's supposed to be fresh and new and impacted by new cards, so. But we'll see.
I guess like I'm hopeful because I think it's going to be a bigger toolbox as opposed to a smaller one, right? And that's always got like the fact that I have more tools to play with is fun, right? Like I see the appeal in that. Obviously, this is the early stages, and I'm being hopeful about it, right? I'm being like very hopeful because maybe nothing changes. Maybe in a year, all I do see is just Wandering Emperor and Make Disappears, and I'm not miserable at all because I love those cards. But the point is, like,
Krim just wants another year with
actually,
Blade
that's Krim's
Rend. I
deck.
get it.
yeah. I see, I see the Wizards meta that they're trying to have is a Krim friendly meta, and I don't hate that whatsoever.
Well, this might be a perfect transition because we got new Magic cards to talk about, and we're going to talk about some cards from a commander set, I think, that is trying to maybe also sort of make a little impact on older Eternal formats like Legacy and Modern. So we're talking about Lord of the Rings, and before we get into these cards, and we got some cards to talk about, we're about halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through spoiler season. What's your initial impressions? Like, we knew the set was coming. Are you happy with it? Or is it better or worse than you expected it to be? I'm curious, just broad strokes, first impressions of the set.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that this was originally designed for Modern. Or it was
Well,
said to be
legal
for
in
Modern.
Modern, yeah.
Modern
Yeah,
legal.
Well, okay, that's not the way. I don't remember it being marketed that way. I remember it's like, oh, the brand new. I think it shifted tones somewhere halfway through, right? Like,
remember our fears of Gandalf aggro or whatever in Modern?
Yeah.
Rest
Okay,
assured.
I'm not.
If
I'm
you don't
not
like
nuts,
Lord of the
right?
Rings, you'll probably never see it in Modern.
I'm not nuts, right? Like they did say, like, oh, this will be a Modern set, right? And I'm like, okay, so what they meant to say was it is Modern legal, but that's not the way it was initially pushed. Now, as a Modern set, I think I might see 2 cards that like could be played and it would probably be like a 1 of to 2 of, and like or sideboard, and that's it.
Whew. I'm a little higher on it than Krim. I mean, I don't think this. I think this set is overall. It's definitely a commander set, but I think there's for me more than 2 cards that I think have some chance to maybe see play. But Richard, what do you think, or do you just want to jump into the cards, guide us through some spoilers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the set, I think is better than I expected. Like I like Lord of the Rings, but I'm not like a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. So when I see like these cards, like the tree folk thing, I'm like, oh, I remember this. Or like the eagle, I'm like, oh, I remember this character. That's pretty cool, right? So like there's some like nostalgia and throwback. So it's a lot better. It blends in with the Magic universe, well, like as expected, because everything is Lord of the Rings. Like if you don't like Lord of the Rings, like literally the whole fantasy genre is Lord of the Rings, right? So this high fantasy stuff. So, the Magic the Gathering thing of like orcs and dwarves and whatever is all basically Lord of the Rings, just a couple lawyer complaints away, right? But yeah, so I think it blends in nicely. It's clearly a commander set. We scraped the bottom of the barrel here for modern playables that we're going to talk about in a second. But overall, I think the set's pretty cool. And then watching how Wizards approached it, watching their stream and stuff, it's very clear that they put a lot of love and effort into it. Yeah. So I think the set will be a success. And I'm just ignoring prices for a second. So, when I actually want these cards and see how expensive they are, maybe my tune will change because, the sealed product is not cheap. No. But let's get into the cards. So lots of cards. Check them over at mtgpreviews.com. Because it is a modern legal set. We tried very hard to find some modern cards in here, okay? So obviously there are tons of new legendaries. Like every character from Lord of the Rings has like multiple versions at multiple rarities. So you don't have to, buy all mythics, right? You can get all your favorite cast members at uncommon and stuff like that as well. But okay, let's start off. Forge Anew, 2 and a white. It's an enchantment at rare. When it ETBs, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. As long as it's your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could cast an instant. You may pay 0 rather than pay the equip costs of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns.
So this has an obvious home, right? It has a home, but like how many?
So I think it'll be it's a Hammer Time card, right? Really 0. I think it's
really for Sigarda's Aid that you already run.
I mean, there's upside. Sigarda's Aid 5.
It's additional Sigarda's Aid. The being able to equip at instant speed, I think, is maybe a bigger upside in Hammer Time than it seems at first glance. Because remember, Hammer, the creature that you put it on, it loses flying. So you have like Ornithopters and so forth in the deck. Ideally, you want to be able to get in with this evasive attack. The ability to swing with your team of like Ornithopters and wait till after blocks and then free equip a hammer on the unblocked creature, that's a way to force in extra damage. I also like the reanimation mode. Like, I think that's another sneaky upside. People can kill the hammer. There's also like Chalice is really good against Hammer Time to just counter the hammer. This is a way you can fight through some of those hate cards. So I don't think it's a 4 of. I don't even know if it's fully a main deck card, but I would be surprised if there were not like at least a couple copies in the 75, right?
That's what I'm thinking. Like, is this just like a 1 to 2 of in the 75 somewhere? Because like I could see that. Like, it just being Sigarda's Aid number 5 is not exactly a bad thing, especially when it's doing more than just doing Sigarda's Aid stuff, right? The problem is that I do have with it is that it is 3 mana, right? And I'm curious if like that is a big enough drawback for them not to play it at all, which is, it could potentially be, right?
That is a lot for Hammer Time.
It's reactive as well, unless you're going to just ignore the reanimating part of it. Like if you knew your hammers were being destroyed, I feel you would try a different approach. Like 3 mana is a lot. And like the deck list is so tight, you actually need like real Hammer Time players to like see if they're actually going to cut anything to put this in. But 3 mana is a lot. And you're going to tap out to play this 3 mana thing? Like, if a Hammer Time player taps out, that's when I breathe, a sigh of relief, right? It's always like the sus attacks with like mana up. You don't know when you're going to die at any second because something, and Sigarda's Aid, hammer stuff is coming, like end of turn, whatever. So 3 mana seems slow, but I don't know. This is like the only potential home, right? Is there any other like Stoneforge decks? Non-hammer Stoneforge decks, like Stone Blade decks, or any other real homes for this thing? Cauldron?
No.
The reanimation mode is intriguing there, right? Like 3 mana to get back Calder Complete. That's not horrible. Like that's a pretty reasonable price for reanimation. I don't know what shell that would actually work in.
You
but
play with Fable.
Yeah, Fable, discard your Calder Complete, reanimate it. Like I don't think that deck list exists now, but I wouldn't be surprised to see people try to brew around that aspect. Or like Argentum Armor. Can Argentum Armor be a thing in Modern?
Yeah, because
just like loot it away, reanimate it,
right?
equip for free, blow up a land. Like, so maybe there's some
Sword of Body in mind.
Sword of Body in mind.
You can actually do this with swords, right?
Yeah.
Is there a Stoneforge deck here? This seems bad, but
unfortunately, all those plans get blown out by Void Ren. But other than that, it seems like it could work.
Outside of Void Ren, like legit though.
Can Argentum Armor destroy lands? No, right?
I believe isn't it permanent?
Or yeah, it's Annihilator and permanent, right?
I'm gonna look. I will double check.
No, there's no Annihilator on it.
Destroy target permanent. Yeah, so it does blow up lands.
Okay. Maybe this is a deck because you can start chipping away at lands if they don't have anything relevant.
It seems fun to try at least. Like it's a deck I will build. I don't know how good it'll be, but Stoneforge, Fable, like ways to fill your graveyard. You can even go Trash for Treasure as a backup, like artifact reanimation spell. There might be something there. Sadly, this is probably one of the best Modern cards from the set too, and we're kind of like,
That's what I was gonna say. Like whether or not you agree this is in the deck or not, and I'm glad y'all are gonna try that new deck. I good luck with that. And second off,
we're sitting here brewing tier 5 decks. Okay, this is Modern playable. We've done it. Yeah. We did it.
That's how. Okay, but think about how deep you have to go right now. This is only a 1 to 2 of, right? If at best, even from like best case from sets and
okay. All you dooms here. Let's go straight to the meat here. Stern Scolding. Okay, blue, instant. Counter target creature spell with power or toughness 2 or less. Is this playable?
Yes, it is playable.
I think it's decent.
Okay, will you play it and be happy about it? And what shells?
I think this is exactly indirect to we kind of talked a little bit about it, but with each other. But it's nice to stop the ETB of like Stoneforge.
So it stops Stoneforge, it stops Ragavan, it stops Solitude.
So does removal. Yep. Yeah, it hitting Solitude and Stoneforge are the big ones. Ragavan. Yeah, it's nice that it can hit it, but that's okay. It's not if you can hit that with removal, right? Like the ETB entering from like Solitude, from Stoneforge, those are more important. It also stops grief, right? Like a lot of the invoke elementals, right?
It misses Fury, but I actually went through all the Modern creatures, and if you look at like the 50 most played creatures, it's like 30 something, so more than half. As Krim said, some of those creatures would be just as easily answered by Fatal Push or a random removal spell, whatever, a Lightning Bolt. But like there are some Seasoned Pyromancer, some of the Invoke Elementals, those are big ones. Stoneforge is a big one where you really want to stop the ETB. Sanctifier and Vex, stopping that is relevant against some decks so it doesn't exile your graveyard. So there are scenarios where this is better than a removal spell. Overall, though, like, it is more conditional. You got the timing restriction. Does this replace, like, let's say you're putting Murktide. Are you replacing Unholy Heats or Lightning Bolts with this? Like,
no.
I'm kind of skeptical, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no. This is, to me, I look at this like almost like a fancy blue Fatal Push, right? Like, this is like, are you not just like countering whatever? And like, it feels like the same as removal for the most part. And I think that's the problem. Except this removal is much worse when you top deck it.
I mean, if you're like a mono blue deck, which we don't currently have one, but we have had like mono blue decks in the past, it seems really good there. If you're a color combination or like Simic even, where you don't have good early game removal, then I think this like goes up in value.
Would you play this though, or just play like Mana League or something? Like, I don't know, Spell Snare, whatever counter spells we play in Modern, like is like a generic one that's not Make Disappear even. That's unplayable.
I think its ceiling.
You would play Mana League before you play that. Right?
I think its ceiling is a sideboard card. Like I think in the right matchups, it's really, really good, and I would want to have access to it. But then there's also matchups where it's almost dead. Like if you're into Tron or like Living End, like it just does nothing, right? So I don't think you can main deck it, but I could see it being in the
Tron
like
player might have Matter Reshaper.
got him. But I could see it being a sideboard option.
Well, that was our hope.
How many of these can you honestly put in your sideboard though? Like if you think about like maybe like 1 or 2, right? Like 2 is like getting real generous, but like
yeah,
like I feel like this is it's the miser spell snare, right? It's just like, oh god, like, oh god, when am I gonna draw this, right? Like
it's not even worth your sideboard slot. When I draw a sideboard card, my win percentage should increase by like 5 to 10. Like it's like it should really hose the other deck. This is like a mild upgrade over something, right? Like I don't even know that it's worth a sideboard slot.
So not impactful.
Like play Fatal. I would rather like start splashing colors and play Fatal Push or Unholy Heat or something. No, before you start playing this.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah,
that might be
like,
true.
Like Spell Snare had a point because like on the draw you could do something that you couldn't do at all before, right? Because there was no removal back then. No one plays Spell Snare nowadays, right? But there's no removal that you could use, and you could use that as a counter spell. So it had a point, but this needed to be free or something for it to actually pay for its downside, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
okay,
because I can. That's the thing, right? Like I just don't know how many slots can you actually put to this because, you want to see it early, right? You want to see it early. You want to have it right away, so you want to increase the numbers of it. But then in Modern, can I really be doing what is essentially a removal spell, like times 4? Like this is, and that's bad after the thing's resolved.
And there's also like some play draw issues, right? Like this stops Ragavan if you're on the play, but if you're on the draw, you're already like getting beaten down by the monkey. So if you're on the play in the right matchup, it seems good.
Yeah. so if you add all these like caveats, all these things, right? Then it's okay. It's like okay.
Yeah, that's the ceiling is okay.
We don't play okay cards in Modern, people.
Well, I don't know, y'all
insanely broken cards from Horizon sets. Okay,
Richard, I don't know how you went from trying to brew some Argentum armor deck to like I'm then saying we don't. There's
a ceiling. If you hit the Argentum armor reanimation, you're gonna win. You cast this thing, you're like, I don't know, I just casted a Fatal Push. Like,
I'm gonna be very real with you, Richard. Are you going to win if you reanimate Argentum armor?
Oh, you laugh. You watch me pick away your lands, Krim. Try to get to your Jace the Mind Sculptor when you have 2 lands.
Is this your Strangleroot guys 2K23?
No, but I got a real one for you. Speaking of monkey, how about Flowering of the White Tree? White, legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control have +2/+1 and ward 1. Non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. So you go monkey into Flowering of the White Tree, and you have a 4/3 monkey with ward 1. Is that the truth?
Okay. You know what? I don't think if your argument is that this card is good with monkey, I think it's monkey that's carrying it.
What if you play?
Otherwise, what is
Samaru? It's a 1 mana 4/3 now.
I got you. So we're going Boros and we're playing Zurgo Bellstrike.
Oh, Zurgo! You play Zurgo?
I'm kidding, Richard. I'm kidding.
I actually no. I don't think I'm not kidding. I actually think there's like potential for some sort of legendary aggro deck with this card. I think the pieces might exist. Like there was like a long time ago, right after Ragavan came out, there was this like legendary aggro deck that was like Ragavan's, Thalia's, I think it had Toshik in it in the 3-drop slot, Zurgos, and the idea was to just maximize the power of your Mox Ambers and like dump your hand super, super quickly. I actually think that could be a thing. Not only with this, but there's like Mary is another card from the Lord of the Rings set, which is like a Boros 2/2 hasty legend that if you attack with another legend, draws a card. I think the pieces exist for that deck to work, and I think this enchantment would be a part of it, right? Like +2/+1 and ward for 2 mana. It is legendary, but still,
it's legendary though. This is the problem with this deck.
You can't stack them up.
You need 4 of these, then you're gonna draw. Like your hand will be like 3 Ragavans and 2 Flowering of the White Trees.
Got him.
But better yet, it'll be like 3 Flowering of the White Trees and like 2 Thalias or something. You're like,
which, by the way, the
Mox
Thalia,
Ambers and 2 Flowering of the White Trees. Like
your Thalia will tax these. By the way,
yeah. That's the problem, and it taxes your Mox Ambers, and your Mox Ambers are legendary as well. But when it works out, it'll be glorious, right?
I mean,
I think this card would have been good if it was mixed with the Rising of the Day card, which is creatures you control have haste, and then legendary creatures you control get +1/+0. But it's a 3-mana enchantment, right? So if they kind of like merge those 2 cards together, where your legendaries also had haste, maybe
that would
but like it
really strong,
it
wouldn't
would
it?
It would, but like even then, like, do you think? Let's just assume this hypothetical version that I just mentioned. Do you think then that deck exists in Modern? Because what you're doing is still worse than like Hammer Time.
I think that the Boros, if there's one Modern deck that comes out of this set that's actually a new Modern deck, I think Boros Legends is the deck that has the biggest shot. Not saying it's going to happen, but if anything actually took off and became like legit tier 2 deck, I think that would be what my vote would be right now. Partly because I think the deck could be decent, and partly because there's not a lot of competition as far as other cards that could make decks.
My vote is some obscure combo piece that we're not recognizing here.
Yeah, I guess that's a possibility too.
His monkey, I think his monkey gets removed, and then you are so behind. You just have a flowering tree there. Like,
yeah, without
the game is over for you, right? They're like
without
8/8 Murktide. What are you gonna do now? You're like, have fun. Mary. It's a 4.
Yeah. Have fun taking your turn off. You know, like. I mean, like, let's think here then. So, okay, clearly the blue Fatal Push spell is terrible, or not as great. And then, you know, the Forge New, meh, right? And then now we've got this card, which is also okay and probably better in Commander. But what about goblins?
Oh,
there's
all right.
This set has a lot of goblins, right?
There are some legends.
Moria Marauder, red. It's a 1/1. It's a goblin warrior. It has double strike. When a goblin or orc you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card in a library. You may play that card this turn. Does this save goblins?
I don't know if goblins goes tier, but I think this is the only like card that I could see actually being played, taking a slot in a deck.
I mean, so
really, Seth also thought the same. I thought this card is hot trash.
So here's the thing. Here's
the
thing.
Over the other hot trash.
You gotta think about how goblins works though. Like the upside of goblins is you have 8 tutors. You have 4 matrons, 4 harbingers because you need it for the Snoop combo. So yes. A card like this is really easy to play as a one of and not draw it most of the time. But then in this scenario where it's going to be good, you just violin your matron, get this, play it, generate a lot of card advantage. Goblins go super wide. So I think like for me, the floor is being a one of tutor target. Am I going to jam 4 of these and build my deck around it? No. Do I think it's good enough, like, as a way to rebuild after a sweeper or something when your combo gets disrupted to, like, try to draw some cards and get back in the game? Like, is it good enough in that context? I think the answer is probably yes. Like, as a one of. And I think the same's maybe true of Legacy. It triggers on any creature, right? It's not just itself, so it doesn't even need to attack. You can just vial it in, swing with the other stuff, draw some cards. Like, so I think as a one of tutor target, it's probably good.
Yeah. And this so far to me is actually the most playable card.
Ooh, really? I don't think we haven't talked about, okay, I gotta ask you guys about a card then, because this is one that
as of right now
other people are hyping the most. Like if you were gonna ask, like, just pull the Magic, like, Modern or Legacy community, the number one card, the card I think it would be is Orcish Bowmasters. 2 mana 1/1 flash, Orc Archer, ETBs, or whenever opponent draws a card, except the first one they draw for their turn, it deals 1 damage to any target and then amass Orcs 1. This is a card I see people, it's one of the most expensive cards in the set. It's also one that people are really, really high on, changing Modern, changing Legacy. Is this card worthy of the hype? Like, is this something you just play to snipe down Ragavans and like hate on Brainstorms, or is this like a Narset wheel combo piece where you gotta like build your deck around trying to maximize this card?
I think the reason why there's hype around is that you don't really have to build around it, right? Like it is just a generically good card. Now, this is like of the things, like of all the cards in this set, I think this is actually the most playable. The Goblin that we had mentioned was the most playable up until this point. Right?
Okay.
That we talked about. But like this is the most playable card to me in the set, right? Like I think this card is actually really good. It's a flash 1/1, but like dude, like you can flash this in and then you just generate a body and deal one. Like you get 2 bodies, right? You get this plus the amass.
Yeah, it's like a raise the alarm, right? Essentially. Yeah.
Because
it's
so
raise the alarm
let's say
that
if nothing happens, you just flash this in. You get a 1/1. You ping something and you get a 1/1 army or an orc army, right? So you get 2 1/1 bodies and you ping one. If they brainstorm, you get to deal 4 damage split anyway. And then you get a 1/1 and you also get a 4/4 as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or 4/4.
And that's like for 2 mana. Like that's ridiculous. The biggest complaint I've seen is like, it's a black card. Like, what do you do with, like, who plays this? There is no black deck that kind of wants this. So that's the problem. And then also, people, if they see you holding the mana, they're not going to brainstorm into it. Like, that's the dream scenario, right? It's just like if they have a consecrated Sphinx, I'll just flash in Notion Thief and I win the game, But like people are not going to let you do that. But it's only 2 mana, so it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Is there any modern playability to this thing?
So it's not as good, right? In Modern, there's no brainstorm to hate on, or even like ponders and preordained. So there's less card draw. On the other hand, like there's maybe more homes. I could see like Yawgmoth running it. It's 2 bodies to sacrifice. Like you get some incidental value off of it. I'm not sure though. Like in Modern, like what are you hating on in specific? Like it's just such a different format because there's no brainstorm holding everything together.
Consider.
Yeah, I mean, consider. Someone played like hates on Jace or Teferi, I guess, if you can keep it on the battlefield against control.
Elementals,
Like
Risen Reef.
Risen Reef doesn't even
Risen Reef.
Risen Reef doesn't draw
doesn't
though.
card.
Technically, it's like
it doesn't
reveal and
draw.
put it in your hand. It hates on Yogg, but Yogg, like the first thing they sack, can just snipe it. I mean,
Right.
maybe it's still. Yeah, I think in Legacy it's going to be good. Like just that brainstorm line, or even if you slow down the brainstorm, it's worth it. In Modern, I'm less sure. Like in Modern, maybe it's still good enough. I like that it snipes monkey. Like even just the ETB, like 2 bodies, snipe a monkey, snipe a hierarch. Like that's something.
What was the fairy vandal thing? So whenever your opponent
Fairy
draws a second
Mastermind?
card, and then you can force each player to draw a card,
Yes.
so it activates
Yo.
your Bowmasters while you're at it.
Yeah, are fairies back plus Orc Archer? You play fairies. You load this in there.
Unironically, I've seen people talking about Burning Inquiry. Just like the old Hollow One trick. 1 mana, each player draws 3, discards 3 at random, and then you flash this in beforehand and like get a 4/4 and ping them a bunch. Like, so maybe you got to build around it in Modern.
That's pretty good, actually. Okay. That's it. I think this is our best card. We're going with our best card halfway through the list because we're getting pretty dire.
Yeah.
So now we'll go back
The
to the
rest.
questionable cards. Okay. So Pippin, Guard of the Citadel, white and a blue. So 2 mana, 2/2, legendary creature, Halfling Soldier, Vigilance, Ward 1. Another target creature, tap another target creature you control gains protection from the card type of your choice until end of turn.
So it's like
so Mother of Runes, kind of.
like,
It's a card type protection.
2 mana,
so-
2 mana mom. It's essentially Mother Runes. I guess the difference is better against colorless stuff. If your opponent has like a colorless removal spell or a Karn, you can get protection from a Planeswalker or whatever, a battle or something. Is a 2 mana mom worth it though? Like, is that a playable card?
What deck wants that? Like
There's soldiers
Hammer
in
Time.
Modern.
Hammer Time doesn't want this, right? And Hammer Time is the only deck that would probably fully utilize Mom, right? And then after Mom, there's Stepmom, right? So like, this would be number 3.
So there's not
it's
really
you control. You can't even use this to knock a hammer off.
Yeah,
You
they've
have to
wised up
control
to
the
that
creature.
shenanigan. Yeah, I can't do that anymore. Yeah, I don't know what deck would want it. There's not really soldiers, although soldiers do keep getting better. So maybe eventually there's some sort of like vile soldier deck, like a merfolk deck, but with soldiers. Like that could be a thing. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine. It's also legendary, which I think is a pretty big
Right.
drawback. Like decks that want Mother of Runes or Giver of Runes usually want 4 of them. It seems tough to play 4 of these with it being legendary. So I don't know where it fits.
If you're playing this, you're playing 1, maybe, and at best, like actually no, just 1.
Maybe like
why would I ever go to 2?
Maybe a Coco deck, like just an extra, like one of extra Giver of Runes style effect in a Coco deck or something.
But it feels so bad if I Coco into this, right? Like if I Coco into this and another mom, so I have 2. I have like a mom and I have Pippin, right?
You just protect your team all day, protect each other.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever dying, and you're never winning.
Meanwhile, like a hammer is flying over your head, you're dying. I don't want to protect. Okay, we have another halfling, delighted halfling, a single green, so 1 mana. It's a 1/2. Tap it to add colorless. Tap it to add mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast legendary spells, and that spell can't be countered.
Well, what about instead of Boros,
Boseiju.
you go
the OG Boseiju, but on a mana dork. But
Just
it has
go
to be
Naya.
legendary.
go Naya Legends.
There's so many of these cards that I read them and I'm like, boy, I wish this set was Pioneer legal. Like, there's so many cards that are like not quite good enough for Modern that would be like, this would be such a banger in like Bard class. Like, this would be such a great Bard class card, like perfect Bard class card. But no one really plays Bard class in Modern. I think this is a Modern playable card. Like, Mana Dork plus Cavern of Souls. That seems reasonable. I just don't think there's a deck for it right now. If there's ever like the standard Joda deck, if someone ever figures out a way to like do something along those lines in Modern, I think this is an easy 4 of, but there's no current deck that you just slot this into that I can think of.
What about Yawgmoth? Do people counter Yawgmoth on the way down?
Yeah, but that's the only
I wonder
legendary.
if it's worth
right?
it. I mean, so
that's
it's
like
still
still
colorless
mana
mana, even for
I guess that's
non-legends. So I guess
cast
maybe
Kangaroo Geist with it.
Yeah, like the thing is, you want the colored mana.
Yeah, you do. The colored mana is colorless is a drawback. Like a colorless mana dork isn't that good. But I don't know. I guess like Grist and Yawgmoth it would protect, and maybe Hapatra if you're that build. Maybe that's enough. Like to play it over. I guess they're playing Grazer now. Is the main mana dork in that deck, Gabriel Grazer. I mean, maybe there's a deck where you just gotta resolve. Like, what about Omnath? Like, I really want to resolve my Omnath. Is it worth it in that context, or do you have to?
Spells?
But
I mean, Murktide plays a bunch of counters.
The problem with Omnath is that like they have 50 different good cards, right? So like they don't mind getting an Omnath counter. They'll just play something else that is also good. So at that point, like sure, maybe you counter my Omnath, but I think Omnath might or may not be my best spell to counter. So I don't think Omnath needs it, right?
Oh, the Primeval Titan isn't legendary.
Not legendary.
Nope.
Yeah.
So okay. There's currently nothing that makes me want to play this in Modern.
Yeah, I just don't know where it fits. Like, I think it's good enough. I think it might get there someday.
But it has to be a spell, right? Because if it's a creature, you can play Cavern of Souls and call it a day. So you're really trying to get a legendary spell, which
we
don't have many of. Planeswalkers would be the most common one, right? But
yeah.
I don't know if you want a Mana Dork in a Super Friends deck, though. Maybe.
Although, but you could, like, that actually isn't the worst, right? You play this into 3 fairy, and then you shut down.
Then, no one's countering anything. No one's countering your stuff that game, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Samwise Gamgee. Selesnya 2-drop. Green-white. 2/2. Halfling Peasant. Whenever another non-token creature enters a battlefield under your control, create a food token. Sacrifice 3 foods. Return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand.
So this is like pure. There's exactly one deck. There's this Lannis deck that I don't know if have you ever seen like the Lannis Academy manufacturer deck in Modern? Like you Coco into Lannis and Academy manufacturer, and then like every token you make is making 3 tokens. So you get treasures and you just like combo off and play through your deck. I think this is like easy staple in that deck. That deck's like definitely tier 4 or tier
Is that a
3.
real
Like
deck? I've seen Bill do this on Commander Clash, but is this a modern deck?
it's 5-0'd at various times. Like people have had like fringe success with it. So I think it's like really good in that deck. But again, that's like definitely a tier 3 deck. So, but I do think that deck improves. Does it improve enough to be like tier 1? I would doubt it.
No.
But I do think it gets better as a result of Samwise joining the mix. And also, like, what's the other one? Peregrine Took or something does also kind of like fits with that combo by making an extra token. So, and then they're cheap enough to Coco into. So I think they show up in that deck, but yeah, I don't know how many people care about that deck. It is fun though.
I mean,
All right.
I don't think it's played in that.
Another Hobbit. Actually, I just realized that they're all called halflings and not hobbits.
Yeah, no hobbits in the set.
Why? Why?
Probably because I imagine that halflings will appear more later, right?
Yeah,
Down
but
the line.
isn't that like didn't Wizards make halflings to not infringe on like Hobbit IP, and then now they're just naming all the hobbits halflings, thus shattering that argument? I'm confused.
It is kind of weird, yeah.
But okay, Rosie Cotton of South Lane, 2 and a white, so 3 mana, 1/1. It's an uncommon, spicy. Legendary creature, Halfling Pheasant. When Rosie Cotton of South Lane enters the battlefield, create a food token. Whenever you create a token, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosie.
Okay, so this is a 2-card infinite creature combo. Rosie Cotton, Scurry Oak. Scurry Oak is a 3-drop that when you put a counter on it, you make a 1/1 squirrel. So you get both of them. Rosie, counter on Scurry Oak, back and forth, infinite squirrels. Is that good enough to see play in Modern? Like, is that even exciting? They're both 3-drops, so you can Coco into the whole combo. But it is infinite creatures, so you gotta attack with them theoretically to win the game, most likely, so you don't just immediately win the game. Is that good enough?
Is that better than, like, actually, that infinite creatures equates to the same as, like, pretty much infinite life.
Yeah, because you already have several Selesnya.
Yeah, you have this
creature-based combos that can be Coco'd into already.
It's already existed, right? Like, for the longest time. And the difference is, like, I guess it went from 3 cards to now 2 cards.
Yeah, and also, like, there was, like, Ivy Lane Denizen could replace Rosie, but it was 4 mana, so you couldn't Coco into it. So I think it's straight up 2 cards now, rather than, like, 2.5 or 3, and everything is Cocoable.
So it's better.
Well, if it's 2 cards, it is better, but does that mean it's a good combo?
That's the question. It's the best version of the combo we've seen, but is that enough to make it, like, a real deck in Modern?
Well,
this has
on
the
top
most
of that,
potential then, no? It's actually a real win con. You play your Selesnya shell, which has existed. Is this the most likely to be played in Modern then? if you took your 3-card combo that couldn't be Coco'd into and made it a 2-card Cocoable combo.
Yeah.
The problem is
you end of turn it. You can end of turn it, then untap attack, right?
It is
You're trying to go to Coco, right?
Coco. It is disruptible by removal. Like any removal spell fizzles the combo.
That's always the case.
But if you have that 2-drop Pippin. You got Pippin to protect the combo. We can go just full on Lord of the Rings combo.
Oh my god.
I think it's the most playable, though.
I think I saw half a movie about that once. I mean, maybe,
I don't know if
it probably is.
It's playable. It's like better than what we had before, but like, do you think it actually changes the landscape in Modern? I don't think so.
Okay, what's more likely to see play? Forge Anew or Rosie Cotton of South Lane?
Rosie Cotton of
I feel
South
Rosie, right?
Lane.
Maybe Rosie is number 1.
Rosie
overall.
or Stern Scolding? It's Rosie, right? Like,
yeah,
well,
it makes Selesnya a tier 3 deck instead of tier 4, or maybe tier 2 instead of tier 3, where Stern Scolding and Forge Anew kind of do nothing.
I think Orcish Bowmasters and the Moria Marauder are higher up.
Oh, interesting.
I think the question is like, so Forge Anew, there's an obvious home for the deck, a top tier home. But the question is it good enough for the home? Rosie Cotton, there's no top tier home. The question is the combo good enough to be competitive in Modern? It's hard to weigh those two things against each
You
other.
just play some hate bears stuff, and then you cook over to your victory.
But like, if Devoted Druid Vicia Remedies, like 2/2 go infinite mana combo, like if that's not breaking Modern, is like Infinite Squirrel's really the thing that's gonna like...
That's a 3-card combo.
Yeah, I guess you need a
cards.
finisher. Yeah. I mean,
That's
I
one
could...
whole card difference.
I could buy the argument that Rosie Khan is the most impactful Modern card we've seen so far. Or most likely to create an archetype, at least.
Wait,
But
we
if it's two
forgot some
cards-
really playable cards. So we gotta ninja them in, which is the land cycle. Minas Tirith. Oh, I don't know how that's pronounced. People are gonna yell at me for that. Legendary
Welcome to my
land.
world.
When it ETB's tapped unless you control a legendary creature. Tap to add a white. Pay 2 mana. Tap. Draw a card. Activate only if you attacked with 2 or more creatures. That's the white one. Mines of Moria. So they all ETB tap unless you control a legendary. It's the red one. Pay 4 mana. Tap. Exile 3 cards from your graveyard. Create 2 treasure tokens. Baradur. XX black tap, amass Orcs X, activate only if a creature died this turn.
I like
And
these.
Riverdale. You have Riverdale.
Useful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Left off.
which is Rivendell.
I call it Riverdale.
God.
Just to offend all the
You have a
all the
PhD in
Lord.
Lord of the
all the
Rings.
Lord
It's
of the-
Rivendell, where Elrond
It's-
lives. Okay, it's blue.
But
for some
if
reason.
you call it Riverdale, everyone gets upsetty spaghetti, and it's funny.
One of the blue taps, scry 2, activate only if you control a legendary creature. And then the Shire is the green one. 2 and tap an untapped creature you control. Create a food token.
I think the
These
blue
are
one's
bad.
the worst
These are
by
bad.
far. Oh, they're bad.
White-
No.
White,
I think
white is kind of.
I think
decent,
white's
though.
good. And
No. Hey, the ability is good, right? The ability's fine. Maybe not Riverdale, but but like the problem I have with these is that when was the last time I could play a tapped land? Because I need a legendary creature, right? For these to come into play
Yeah,
untapped.
Ragavan.
I mean, yeah, there's
Okay,
Ragavan-
then okay, sure. But what about if you have Ragavan plus this, and it totally dunks your turn 1 play? Why do that to yourself?
Or I mean, like the white one. Look at like mono white humans. You're already playing Thalia. You're already playing Adeline.
At 2 mana.
You're already playing
At 3,
Typheon. Well, you don't have to play this on turn 1. Like you can play it. You can
No.
play it like on turn 2 or turn 3.
but like so my like yeah, that's true. But like the abilities and the activations, right? Like are fine. But like like in Commander, great. Love these cards. These are great there. In Modern, I think that the times that you will dunk yourself because you have these and when you need it for as your second land drop to play Thalia or your third land drop, right, to play like whatever, something Adeline, it's going to bite you in the butt. Cuz it's going to come into play tapped. You cannot play a tapped land. Yo, look.
It reminds me of the fast lands, and like you always draw it on like turn 3 or turn 4,
Yeah.
whatever. You can't play it anymore. You're like, no, my game is ruined because of this fast
Yeah.
land.
Right? Like
But white might actually. So the only ability that's strong enough to warrant that, I think, is white, right? To that downside, and it has to be specifically that white deck that's playing Thalia.
So you would spend 3 mana essentially to draw a card, right?
Well, you're an aggro deck, so you play curve. You curve out essentially, and then when you're out of gas, you use this thing to try to keep going. But you know you're not going to take turn 3 off and like hit with 2 creatures and draw a card. No, you're going to keep deploying your threats, right? Or maybe you think a wrath is coming. Maybe you do that, right? But in general, you're just going to go all aggro and then use this to kind of refill your hand later, right?
I mean, I love Castle Lochwain. I play that in a lot of any sort of like aggro deck. That's going to come into play untapped more often. But I think like the card draw mode on the white one's really good. The red one's like slightly intriguing just for indomitable creativity, like 2 treasures, sack him to creativity. But I don't know how you ever make it come into play untapped in that deck, which is the problem because you don't have any creatures.
The only deck that could like maybe take advantage of this is like, I guess, Primeval Titan decks, but like, does Amulet Titan need more cards to make it good? No, like it's fine. So like these could go in there because, you know, they have Amulet.
I think the white one sees play. I think that Boros deck. I'm telling you, Boros Legends. Come on, guys.
Nothing is castable. You're gonna have like this land, the red land, the Vox Amber. 3 Vox Ambers probably.
Everything's
Everything's
Thalia.
tapped.
That's your hand.
You're dead. Yeah, you have Thalia to tax your own like spells. That you're just like dead. You're cooking yourself.
4 Ragavans
It's the perfect
in hand.
YouTube video. You just cut all the games where nothing happens in that one game where you actually draw the right sequence. You're like, this deck is busted.
Busted, yeah. 100% win rate. 100% win rate. Did we break it?
All right. No time for Fishmail this week. If you have questions next week, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail. We'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 436 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard, Krim, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we'll be back next week to talk about the rest of Lord of the Rings and whatever else goes on in the world of Magic. So, until then, have a spectacular week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.